All right. Well, thank you, Billy, for coming and having I'm excited to hear your activist story. So I wanted you to start out by just telling me from your early memories of people and events, experiences, how did that shape you and the concerns for social and environmental and climate justice that you now have?
Well, I think it goes back to childhood of being very close to the natural world. I grew up just outside of Boston on the North Shore in Reading. And where I lived on the end of a dead-end road that was surrounded by woods and fields and marshes and swamps. And I spent a childhood in nature. Encouraged by my mother, who grew up on a farm in Ontario, which I visited often in the summer. So a real connection to the natural world. And I can remember when I was probably like 12 or 13 years old, we lived about 2 miles from 128, which is a major highway outside of Boston, and they were just putting in 93, the new interstate that was going to go from Boston up into New Hampshire. And I can remember it was on the edge of my territory. And I can remember being out in the fields there and seeing the surveyors there surveying the property that they were going to put in this new highway. And I can remember at an early age recognizing that something was really wrong with this. I saw these large earth-moving equipment and such ready to tear the earth up. And I can remember as a kid having this urge to tear up the surveying stakes and wanting to stand in the way of what I saw as just this real rape of the earth. And it wasn't 20, 30 years later that I read about Edward Abbey and the Monkey Wrench Gang and that sort of the roots of Earth First, but as a child I didn't know about that, but I felt it intuitively. So I think that's some early memories of how I became involved. But I know Edward Abbey and reading he and others such as Terry Tempest Williams, who lives and grew up in Utah, and she writes about her activism coming out of what she saw, the devastation that happened to her own family, the women in her family, and getting cancers, particularly breast cancer. And she traced it back to the nuclear fallout of the atmospheric testing that the United States did back in the late 40s and the 50s, and the deception that went on, telling people that there was no problem and with that. And that's where her activism came out of that. And yeah, those are some beginnings and some people have influenced me.
Great, great. So have there been special groups or spiritual practices, any people in the faith community and so on, have they played any role in your journey? Faith in the broadest sense.
In the broadest sense, yeah, certainly. I was brought up in the Episcopal Church, and I can remember clearly when I was maybe 10 or 11 years old of the pastor in Reading, where I grew up, saying that, you don't have to believe any of this, or it's up to you to decide whether it's right or wrong, or if it makes any sense. And I felt a real liberation in that, oh my gosh, I don't have to believe all this Christianity and all this talk about Christ, which was really, I felt, again, intuitively, it just felt really overbearing. So it wasn't until I discovered the Unitarian Universalist Church decades later, and that I found what they were talking about really spoke to me in protection of the earth and really feeling a respect for all living creatures. And so that and early readings about Buddhism from back in the 60s, when that seemed to be part of the counterculture. There was something in the air about a respect for the Buddhist tradition. And my early readings then, and people like Gary Snyder, the California poet who lived a Buddhist past. I mean, he went to Japan and lived there for several years and lived as a Buddhist, and I gained great respect for his connection to the natural world. Yeah, again, those are a few people and some connections. Yeah.
Great, great. So where is your journey now?
My journey now, very interesting. I could speak about the last year, or the last 6 months, or the last 6 days. Just in the last 24 hours, I've been reading Chris Hedges, and I've read Chris Hedges for years, but now his talks about the industrial agriculture system in this country and worldwide, and it is really the root causes. He makes a very good case behind climate change, that never mind transportation and oil, we have to look at the way we raise cattle in this country and use cattle and hogs and chickens and everything to feed people, and that seems tremendously unethical. And so just in the last 24 hours, I've decided to become a vegan, and I'm going to make that change in my diet.
Great, great. So what about the last
year or 6 months?
Year or 6 months, yeah.
Well, I've been working with 350 Maine ever since Bill McKibben came to Portland. I guess that was about 2 years ago, this past November. And listening to Bill McKibben and the Do the Math tour, that really spoke to me. I can't remember having been moved as much as maybe since all the way back to the Vietnam War and back in the 60s. Because I've spent a career teaching high school sciences, particularly physics and earth science. And so I followed climate change for the last 40 years and in climate science. And I felt a tremendous frustration, but inability to really take action. And Bill McKibben spoke to how we can all take action. So I've started working with 350 Maine, as I said, about 2 years ago. And with that involvement, I found that it really needed to become more local, needed to become more right here in the community which I live, which is Freeport. I've lived here for more than 30 years now. And I went to a town council meeting last summer, inspired by the council in South Portland, because in the last year, more than a year, I've been involved with the Clear Skies Ordinance down there and did a lot of canvassing and really got to know that community well, went to a lot of the city council meetings, and I was so impressed with how local democracy worked and how the inspiration of those people who organized the citizens of South Portland and what they did in keeping tar sands from their community. I felt that I really needed to pay more attention to what was going on in my own community. So I went to a town council meeting last August, and in that council meeting, the proposal to bring the Metro bus from Portland out to Freeport was being talked about. And one of the councilors was opposed to it and gave tremendously nonsensical answers to why he was opposed. And it just got me, I became so furious. I wrote him emails and he never responded, never gave me any, he never even wrote back and said that he received them. And then I found out that he was running unopposed for re-election. And I said, wait a second. So that's when I took out papers to run for town council, and lo and behold, 4 months after going to that first council meeting, which I'd never been to one before, ever, now I'm on the town council. And now I'm trying to figure out, what can, as a council member, what can we actually do as a town to address climate change? And I'm just learning that the town already is doing a lot of things, and there are a lot of people in town who are taking action. So I hope to be able to help those actions along and just learn more about what we can as a community do, which I'm finding it's a lot.
Yeah. Can you share what some of those exciting initiatives seem to be?
Yeah, the town is already has energy efficiency measures they're taking. They're working with Energy Efficiency Maine, and their solar programs started here. The town planner has a solar initiative where people in town who express an interest in putting solar on their homes can group together and get an economy of scale and hopefully get a lower price for the solar equipment through Revision Energy. There are other solar programs, again, through 350 and the Sierra Club of Maine, to have solar farms, community solar farms, which is a slightly different idea, but again would bring more solar to town. So those are a couple things that are happening.
That's great. That's great. What about, since you've been a teacher and so on, what kind of involvement do you see for youth and young people in this movement on climate change, and also right here in Freeport?
Yeah, that's a great question. One of the things I'd like to do is to reach out to the teachers here in Freeport, because I've heard that there's one teacher whose students are very eager to get involved with the divestment movement, which would be wonderful, and I need to identify who those people are, and I want to meet with them. Another teacher, might be the same teacher, had students who came before the council last summer with a plastic bag ban, with a request to ban plastics. So that's another thing to be looking at, involving students in taking action on climate change. As have learned, Freeport was a leader over 20 years ago where students spearheaded a ban on styrofoam packaging. And Freeport was one of the first. So I think Freeport has a tradition of being a leader on environmental issues, and it would be nice to see that Freeport could continue with that. And the involvement of students is crucial, because it makes a huge difference when you get students coming to speak for the town council. The councilors tend to listen, where if it was just an adult speaking, it might be more easy to ignore. But children coming up and speaking about their future is huge.
Yeah, yeah. I know that you have had a personal witness at Bowdoin over the last year or so on divestment, and there obviously is quite a movement there among the students. But what were the seeds for you to stand out there in the cold at football games and after hockey games and so on with a sign?
Well, again, it started with Bill McKibben and the Do the Math tour, and he had that idea about divestment. That's when I first heard about divestment, from Bill McKibben at the stage of the State Theater right here in Portland, Maine. I started to follow what was going on with divestment, and particularly with colleges. And we did a we were doing vigils at Bowdoin with connection with 350 and no tar sands and the Keystone Pipeline, some of the different actions that were called nationally. I chose to do them in Brunswick because I knew the Peaceworks community there ever since the Iraq War, vigils in the Iraq War. So I knew that there was a body of people there. So we first did, I think it was the Draw the Line effort, which was probably about a year and a half ago. That was a national effort. September, right. 2013. And so I chose to do it before the football game because I was thinking, where on the Bowdoin campus would you get the attention of people? And that's one thing. Before a football game, there are hundreds of people going through one spot right there on, I don't know if you call it College Ave or whatever, the road that goes to Harpswell, right by where the football field is. And we got about 30 or 40 people that came to that first demonstration or vigil. And one of the things was we incorporated divestment into that. I had a huge sign that said, Bowdoin divestment is for the common good. And that started the divestment push at Bowdoin, that one event a year and a half ago. And so I just carried it on to go before every football game. And there was a core of about a half dozen people who would come to that. And then I figured during the hockey season, I'm a great hockey fan. I love to go to the Bowdoin hockey games, and I thought that was another place where there'd be people. And so I started to do that, carry on the vigil before the hockey games for a half hour, and also right after the hockey games when literally hundreds of people were leaving. And that eventually merged with meeting Miles Goodrich and other students there on campus, and ended up with last October when Miles met, and he being the representative of Bowdoin Climate Action, they met with the trustees, which is hopefully just a beginning. It's keeping the conversation on campus alive. So
That's
hopefully,
great.
yeah.
That's great. So I've been struck by a lot of the similarities of what's happening with the climate justice movement, similarities to the civil rights movement, also Red Power, things that we, us older folks, well remember from the 60s, and that it really was students who led that, and we're seeing that again, I think, as young people are waking up, are becoming aware, and are becoming very active, recognizing that their future is at stake in a very real way. Do you have any comments to that observation, and where you see some of the spirit and energy coming from in particular?
Very good questions. Yeah, it seems like a lot of the vigils, like say during the Iraq War, it was mostly people our age who were there, and it was always wondering where the young people were. I think now, from having been at the Climate March back in September, there certainly was an outpouring of youth there. There were, it was all ages, and that was wonderful to see. And the following, that was on Sunday of that weekend, the 21st, and I went the next day to Flood Wall Street, which was the direct action that came out of that. And I was very moved with the young people that were there. The core of people behind that were in their late 20s, early 30s, and it was quite moving to see those young people and the passion that they had, and to hear them speak. And it started in, that day we started at Battery Park and where the organization was. And then we marched from there to Wall Street and then sat down in the street right around where the iconic bull, the big brass bull. And we were in the streets there sitting down, and in turn people would stand up and just speak to the crowd, to all of us, and speak why they were there. And it was just amazing to hear these young people stand up and speak to why they were there. And I could put in, if anybody wants to watch it, Democracy Now! Did like a 10-minute piece on Flood Wall Street, which it's archived online on Democracy Now!, where you can watch that day's events, which to me, I go back and watch it every once in a while now just to give me that hope, because I see where those young people are and to know that they're out there in all communities. So hopefully I'm going to find out who those people are here at Freeport High School, because it seems that there are teachers who are speaking about these issues to their students, and the students want to stand up and be heard. So hopefully we're going to hear more from them.
Yeah. Anything else that you see coming up in your near future that you'd like to share?
We had to submit goals to the town council like a few weeks ago for what we thought what goals should be for the council for the next year. And being a newcomer, I felt it was presumptuous of me to present any rash of goals, and I just said that I want to become a better listener. And I see my role in the council right in the next several months is to just listen and learn. However, on committee assignments, I am on the Conservation Commission and Coastal Waters Commission, which I think is a very good venue, particularly coastal waters and ocean acidification and the ramifications of what that has for Freeport and the clammers, the fishermen, the lobstermen. They are on the cutting edge of climate change. They're going to be the first that are really economically affected. So I think there's a lot to address there. Those are a few things I see that are coming up in the near future.
Great.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for your time and your wisdom and your service to the earth and to this local community of Freeport.
Thank you very much.
That the idea of community, and I think what we're seeing happening with people from many different issue areas are starting to come and find the common ground, the common thread.
That's a great
how
question.
important is it
to
feel that you have support in what you're doing?
That's huge. Finding that community is what I've been thinking about over the last year or so. I started with a divestment petition here in town back last May, and it was astounding how eager people were to sign and to just see somebody who, I had the signs that take action on climate change. I'd sit out in front of the town office or in front of the library, and it was astounding how eager people were to sign and how anxious they were to talk about it, that they felt this tremendous frustration and aloneness and felt that there was no community that was addressing any of these issues. I had over 600 people sign that, and so there is a community of people here in town, and that melded into a bus petition, because it was, and I did a Metro bus petition and got to about 260 people to sign that. It was a much shorter period of time, but there is a community of people that care about the climate. I think that literally thousands of people in town here. When I ran for town office, many people said, don't mention climate change, don't mention sustainability, don't mention the word progressive, because that's going to turn people off. And I think that, there's truth to that argument, but I also think that there is a tremendous number of people in town, which I think is a majority, who, if you, I use those words now, or chose to use them, I think that there would be a great receptivity there. So establishing that community is important. It's not in place yet, but I think it's essential. It's essential. It can't be just one or two or a half dozen people. It has to be a majority. And I think it's there. It's just, how do we come together? That's the question.
All right.
Good enough.
Yeah,
Fantastic.
it's a wrap.
It's
It's
a
a
wrap.
wrap. Great.
Lunchtime wrap.